Everyone, welcome or welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are taking a break from React specific coding challenge and instead solving a generic coding challenge to improve problem solving. So we are tasked with creating a JavaScript function that takes an array of numbers as input and returns a new array containing only unique numbers from the original array. The order of the elements in the returned array should remain the same as in the original array. So we are given a sample input and a sample output. So as you can see from the input, there is double three, double five, and now in the output, we've eliminated the duplicate. The constraint states that our array may contain both positive and negative numbers, so we need to account for that also. And obviously, it may contain duplicate numbers, but the function is to remove duplicates to return only unique numbers. So let's look at a quick sample. So for instance, we have an array of 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 5, and 6. And we're expected to return an array of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We want to eliminate the duplicates in case of threes and a duplicate in case of five. Now, a simple way that we might go about this, or the most straightforward way to go about this, is to obviously loop over our array. And when we loop over it, we want to check. So first we want to loop, and then we want to check if we've seen this number before. So how do we check if we've seen a certain number before? Obviously, we need a storage to store our numbers as we loop. So we go over each number, we loop over one. Have we seen this number before? If we haven't, we definitely want to store it. Then we go over the next number and repeat likewise. We want to check if it is in our storage. If it isn't, we want to add it to our storage. And if it is in our storage, we want to skip over it. Meanwhile, while we are encountering these numbers for the first time, for instance, if we are looping over one and we see that we have a storage, it's not in our storage, we also want to have the new array and return. Let's use something else to indicate. We want to have a new array and indicates to store our unique values here, and then we return that value. So let's clear out our playground and see what that looks like in code. So I'll be writing this code in Replit because it's so much easier to just spin up. If you don't want to use Replit, you can definitely try out any playground of your choice. So first I want to name my array, which is to return duplicates or return dupes. My array takes in, or my function takes in an array. And what we want to do here is we first want to define our storage. So the storage where we check, have we seen this number before? And I'm going to call it store. And our store, we're going to use the set data structure. And this is because set allows us to store the basic functionality of a set is that it stores unique numbers or unique values, not just numbers, unique objects, unique carries. There are no duplicates in a set. And during the course of implementation, you see another reason why we're also choosing set. Also, we want to define our new array, and that's just going to be a generic array structure. And at the end of our code, we want to return our new array. Now, what is our code going to look like? First, I want to use a for of loop. So for every number in an array, and we're using number because we know that it's going to be a number, an array of numbers. So for every number in our array, we want to check if our store has this number. And so this is one reason why I'm also using set as the data structure. You can use any data structure as your storage really. Most of your program solving will be deciding what format to use, what data structure to use, because the beautiful thing about solving coding challenges is that there are very number of ways to do this. So store is a set, and in set we have access to .as, .add. Is different from accessing a property in array. If I were to access a value in an array, I would have to loop over the array as we are currently doing in this parent loop. But with store, we can just easily access it by using the method .as. So if we have that number in our store, what do we want to do? Well, we don't want to add it back to the store because the store is supposed to contain unique values. And we don't also want to add it to our array because if it's a duplicate, then we do not want it in our new array. So we do nothing if our store has this new number. However, if our store doesn't have this number, then we want to go ahead and add this value to our store. So we're adding this new number to our store, and also we want to push this unique value because it doesn't exist in our store, so it's a unique value. So we want to push it into our array. So we're pushing the new number into our array and we're returning that. So we can see that we actually do not need this logic. Again, much of programming is deciding is to, this is sort of like a brute force solution. We are working programmatically. We want this. We want to, okay, what do we want to do? We want to loop over our array. That's the most straightforward thing. There are a number of ways to actually loop. You can use for each, you can use for, you can use for of, and then it now depends on you choosing what method you number one understand, and one method also works specifically for this case. We don't need to use for I equals to 0 and then access the length because we do not need the index of the numbers of our array. We just need the numbers directly. So much of programming is determining what you are trying to solve and picking the right tool to solve what you are trying to solve. Anyway, since now we know that we do not need this direct if store as a null, we instead need the inverse. That if this item does not exist in the store, then we want to do this. Otherwise, we do nothing. And for me, I find that it is much more easier to think in terms of if this exists, what do you want to do? Otherwise, do this, and then inverse that logic. I don't know if that makes sense, but it makes sense to me to use a direct approach rather than thinking in inverse. Like if store doesn't have, what if it has? So I start from that it has, what do we want it to do? Nothing, and then work from there. I hope that didn't confuse you, but much of this channel is dedicated to solving programming problems or coding challenges because it affects the way that we write code. Much of code is not just knowing HTML, CSS, React, JavaScript. All of that are necessary, but the most important part I've found is actually solving a problem because when you work in different organizations, they are not paying you or employing you for your knowledge of how to use all of these tools. Is important, of course, but when it comes down to solving the problem for the organization, designing new features, designing new chores and writing books, most of this will boil down to solving problems. And that's why I love technical challenges so much because they are not obsolete, they are not a waste of time. Although of course they are upended in most organizations, but they are also very important in thinking through a problem and formulating how to solve it. Now that we've gone through all of that digression, let's go ahead. I can see from our code that we have some sort of error. So let's fix that. Okay, now that's cleared up. Cool. So now let's test that our code works. We want to define, so I'm just going to define, assign our array to a solution, and then we're going to console.log solution. Pardon, this array, we want to give it actual values 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6, 7. So when we console the log as solution, we can see the output and we run this. We can see the output in our logs. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All of the duplicates is literally non-existent and our code is still returned as is in our original array because recall the constraints where we have to return our new array the exact way that they appear in our the exact way that they appear in our problem. So now I want to go ahead and test out some negative values also. So we have -1. Let's also have a 0 somewhere. Let's also have a -2, -2, -2, And let's make this solution 2. Can go ahead and also log that. And when we run this again, we see that we have -3, -2, -1, the duplicates are eliminated, and all of that. Now, having our solutions to test with are great, but I've also gone in and added some tests to further assert what we might not be able to test for. So there's tests for if our array is all positive numbers and duplicates. I would have this linked in the description so you can go over the test cases yourself. If we have negative numbers, we have a combination of positive numbers and no duplicates, because it is possible that we have an array where there are no duplicates and we have only negative numbers. How about we have a mix of both? That's test case 5. What if we have an empty array? How about we have an element repeated multiple times, like 5, for instance, as you can see here. I also add a test case that compared what if there's a duplicate of words and strings. Although our condition is strictly numbers in our coding challenge, but the test case tests for both, and why not? Also, we have what if it is not a number or undefined? How are we handling those? So if I clear the history and run again, we should see that all our test cases passed. If they do, by the way, assert is a inbuilt function from Node. I'm only accessing it with require as assert. This is not a module. If I remove this, we have a problem with imports because it's not a module. We're using ES5. I think that's the correct thing. Like the type is not set to module in our package.json, but in case you want to use import, you can be sure to set your type here. So yeah, that basically works. If we go to, let me go to any of the test cases and change that. So this is test case 7. An array with one element repeated should return just the single digits, should repeat just a number. If I say, oh, it's repeating 5, because that's not what we have in our code, we should see a failure where it says that expected values doesn't equal expected. So we are saying that the actual is 5, or what it expects rather is 5, but what is seen is 5. So this is a bit confusing between actual and expected, but you get the point. So having tests just also gives you the extra confidence that your code is solid. Now let's discuss efficiency in terms of time and space complexity. So with time, we're looping through the entirety of the array that runs in O of n time, where n is the given input. So if we have 10 elements in our array, we have 100 elements in our array, our function is going to run for the entirety of the size of our array. So that's an O of n time complexity. And for the space complexity, we are also using, there's a possibility that there are no duplicates in our array. So it's possible for our new array to grow as large as our actual array. So it's still an O of n space complexity. If we have 100 elements and all of those 100 elements are unique, which is a possibility, our space can grow that large. And it's the same for our set. Our set can contain as much as we have as input. So it is O of n in space and time complexities. I hope this was worth your time. I hope you give it a try. If there is any way you are solving this differently, of course, link it down below. If you have a gist somewhere, let me see it. I'll be glad to see it. If you have any suggestions, if you like this video, please subscribe and like. On this channel, we basically solve programming coding challenges to improve our problem solving, and because it's fun. So if that's your cup of tea, I do hope that you hang around because we have so much more challenges. You can check the channel for our React coding challenge, and also we've solved something similar to this but from lit code, and is checking if our code has duplicates, in which case we are returning a true or a false. This is instead a modification of that kind of question. And when you start to solve problem long enough, you start to see some of these similarities in the ways that the questions are packaged and prepackaged. And the most important thing is to gain a deep understanding of solving a problem, and you can apply that knowledge across board. Again, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.